Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of the Dan and Joe Sports Show. As always, I'm Dan.
And I'm Joe.
All right, Joe. There was a lot of pomp and circumstance that's been made for over a year about the retirement of Mike Krzyzewski. The beloved Coach K had his send off, and it was against his heated rivals, the North Carolina Tar Heels. And everything was set up, Joe. Duke was having a great season. Possibly, if they won this game and won the ACC tournament, could be a one seed. North Carolina was, for a while there, they were not a great basketball team. They started getting better. But still, it looked like there was a huge talent gap between this edition of Duke and Hubert Davis's first North Carolina Tar Heels team. You had 80 players come back to celebrate Coach K. They made a huge tunnel for him to walk through. You had game day there. You had tickets that I think the average ticket price was like $99,000 to go to this game. It was nuts. There were a couple tickets that were sold for over $1 million. Everything was set up for the most epic send off we've ever seen for a head coach. Really, I would say in probably any sport ever. And then even in the first half, Duke's suddenly looks really good. They get out to like an 11-point lead at the end of the first half. But all of a sudden, North Carolina whittles it down to a 2-point lead at the end of the first half with a great three-pointer by J.J. Davis. But then in the last 10 minutes of the game, suddenly Duke just falls apart and North Carolina takes over. And they lost, Joe. And not only did they lose, Duke lost pretty handily. And I mean, I'm sure for people like my cousin Tom, who I'm going to bring on the show next week, if they're North Carolina fans, they probably took more delight in this than maybe any win they've ever had over Duke. I'm sure for most neutral observers, probably hated seeing Coach K lose like that because, I mean, even me, who is a North Carolina fan, North Carolina for a long time was always my favorite basketball team because Auburn wasn't good. So my mom went to North Carolina. So I'll admit I'm a little bit of a bandwagon North Carolina fan. So, of course, I like seeing them win that game. But I would say most neutral people, of course, the Duke fans, wanted to see Coach K win his last game. And definitely just a very strange environment. And then you go to the end of it, and Coach K starts apologizing to everybody. And they all start saying no. And he's like, no, you shut up and listen. I'm going to apologize for us playing this bad. And it just all led into, I mean, just amazing. And I didn't watch it real time, but I watched it last night, and it was something else.
Yeah, it's one of the more shocking sports results I've seen, Dan, ever. Like I would say top five as far as just a game where I didn't see a way a team could lose and they lost. And you look back at it, like everything was set up for him, like you alluded to. You had like the NBA commissioner there, Adam Silver. You had several former NBA legends that were there, like just people that weren't even connected to Duke necessarily, or Coach K just came to support him, like, just came to kind of revel in the moment because you have just that unprecedented historic situation of a coach who was there for 42 years at the same college basketball institution and really built that brand. Duke is not the name brand blue blood that they are without Coach K. And I've always, I think, said before on record, that's what makes his involvement with Duke different than what we've seen with other blue bloods like, a Kentucky, Kansas, or even North Carolina or UCLA. And so to lose that game, it's definitely something the North Carolina fans are never, ever going to let Duke live down. But if you're Duke, the only thing you can salvage is that the final script on the season is not, entirely written, and you still couldn't make a deeper run.
Joe, what was interesting too watching it is whoever was, I used to do a lot of editing when I was working for a TV show when I was at Auburn, the one they did about Auburn football. And I know this from my major, working the lower thirds on ESPN and doing the stats was doing an amazing job because the lower thirds they had running of all the different stats of Duke and Coach K was amazing. I mean, I found myself watching that more than even the game because you were showing all of the All-Americans, all the first round draft picks, all of the national championships, the Final Fours. And then, just really interesting facts like the fact that Coach K had the second highest winning percentage in ACC history at home after Dean Smith of North Carolina, and it was .001 percentage point. Like I think that Dean Smith was at .885 and Krzyzewski was at .884, which, Joe, I think that means that if Krzyzewski had won that game, he might have actually passed Dean Smith. And so I'm sure North Carolina fans are even going to use that to go against Coach K and be like, ha ha ha, now Dean Smith's ahead of you in winning percentage in home games too. Like, I mean, that's how deep the rivalry goes, and that's interesting that it was that close. But, it was just blowing me away to see all these different players listed and then watching all the ones that came and witnessed the game, from Grant Hill, who's one of my favorite players growing up, Shane Battier. You saw J.J. Redick there, Christian Laettner. I mean, it was just all of the great Duke players.
Mm-hmm. It was just a who's who list. So many great players were there to show their appreciation for Coach K. But, speaking of appreciation, I think that Hubert Davis getting this win was monumental for him to allow, his kind of time so far at North Carolina to be more appreciated, because I think a lot of people were on the fence about whether maybe he was the right guy the way the early season played out. And for, long stretches of the season, they've been on the tournament bubble, losing handily, to some high caliber opponents and getting embarrassed by Duke in the first matchup a few weeks ago. And so this was a huge win, I think, for the confidence of him maybe going forward as the head coach too.
Yeah, that's a great point, Joe. I mean, of course, he took over for a legend in his own right. Roy Williams was a fantastic coach. He had 3 national championships in North Carolina. He was great at Kansas before that. And, I mean, if it hadn't been for Coach K, Roy Williams was probably, I would say, the most recognizable coach in all of college basketball and the most accomplished coach in all of college basketball, except for the fact that his rival was Coach K. And so Hubert Davis had huge shoes to fill himself, just like John Shire is going to have to fill the shoes of Coach K. And I got to think that if you're John Shire, even though you're upset about that loss, you can say, look at what Hubert Davis did having to come in with Roy Williams. He's had himself a good season. North Carolina is now 23-8. I would say there's a good chance they're going to be maybe a 7 or an 8 seed in the NCAA tournament. While the ACC has been down, it looks like they're going to end up being either the second or the third best team in the ACC. And I got to say that, especially with a little bit of a shaky start, what a great first season for Hubert Davis, no matter what happens the rest of the season.
I think so. I mean, he definitely has solidified his position there going forward. And I think that they're definitely a team that's trending in the direction of maybe being a second weekend NCAA tournament team.
Yeah, Joe, I wouldn't be shocked at all to see North Carolina make a run to the Sweet 16, maybe even the Elite 8. I'd be a little bit surprised with the Elite 8, but I think that they could possibly make that. I think the Sweet 16 definitely wouldn't surprise me there.
I think so.
And so definitely good things for North Carolina fans. I think you can, I'm sure that was a scary thing to lose Roy Williams because he had so much continuity, a guy who had done so much for your program, 3 national championships. Pretty much every year you made the NCAA tournament. And it's good to see that his handpicked successor is doing a good job. And you know what? Maybe if you're a Duke fan, you can take solace in the fact that you saw that Roy Williams guy seems like he's working out. So you should trust that Coach K's decision is also going to work out with John Shire.
That's right. And I still think that Duke has a decent chance to make a deep run in this tournament. I'm not going to write them off. And I have seen, speaking of Shire, that he has a good recruiting class coming in to Durham next year as well. So a lot to build on for him.
Yeah. And I thought it was interesting too, Joe. Did you notice that at the end of the game, actually at halftime too, that Coach K was not the one that was talking to Holly Rowe. He actually let John Shire talk to Holly Rowe. And I wonder if that was a little bit of a nod to he's going to be the man now. Let's see how he handles this moment. You go and talk to him.
Now, and I have seen him do that before too. I've noticed in the past, he's had his associate head coaches do that at halftime sometimes during games.
Okay. Yeah, I was wondering if that was of any particular significance there. But I did want to say, Joe, I mean, that was one of the first times I really got to watch a full game of Paolo Banchero, and he is an excellent basketball player. Because in my mind as an Auburn fan, I wanted to watch him and be like, is he better than Jabari Smith? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'd like to watch both of them together. And I came to this conclusion at the end of that game that I think that Jabari Smith is a better natural shooter than Banchero is. but the Banchero is a more aggressive player, and probably Jabari Smith could use a little bit more aggressiveness in his game.
I could see that. I kind of think that there's no question both of them are top 5 picks. I think you could make a good case for either one of them being the number 1 pick.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I left that game saying I didn't think that either one of them was, in toto a better player than the other one. But I thought that, like I said, that was kind of where I saw the line. I thought that Banchero pushes the floor a little bit better. He's a little bit more aggressive going to the rim, but the Jabari Smith is a much better natural shooter than Banchero is.
I can see that.
Yeah. But speaking of natural shooters, though, I will say that I was also impressed with a couple of North Carolina players. I thought Bako is an excellent player. And then the transfer they had from Oklahoma, that dude could really shoot it from outside. Manic.
Yes. He's a 5th-year guy. He got the extra COVID year. He started his career out with Trae Young, who's now with the Hawks. So he's been around for a while. And, yeah, he's a great three-point shooter.
Yeah. Well, Joe, moving on, speaking of Jabari Smith, so he got freshman of the year in the SEC. No surprise there. Walker Kessler got defensive player of the year in SEC, definitely well-deserved. And Coach Pearl got his first SEC coach of the year while at Auburn. It's his 3rd one overall, and you probably would have thought he's had one at Auburn so far, but he actually hasn't. His 2 previous SEC coaches of the year were while he was at Tennessee. So definitely a huge sweep there for Auburn, and kind of shows what they did in the regular season. And, of course, they finished out the regular season by beating South Carolina and getting their very first outright SEC title since 1999.
Yeah, that's right. And now they're the 1 seed heading into the tournament in Tampa that's already started right now.
That's right, Joe. And wanted to ask you, do you think that Auburn needs to win the SEC tournament in order to get a number 1 seed, or do you think that maybe just making the championship game will be enough?
I think making the championship game will be enough. But, the tricky thing is we know about, the respect or lack thereof towards the SEC in basketball year in and year out. And the last time I checked the bracketology line, they were still at a 2 seed. You got teams like Baylor and Kansas ahead of them, Gonzaga, of course. And so in order to break that trend, you do need to win some games here. And so I would feel a lot better, if they could make it to the championship game.
I think so too, Joe. I think that if they make the championship game, I think they probably get it, unless they play Kentucky and lose. And I think maybe Kentucky will jump them to a 1 seed then, even though Auburn did beat them, but that was at home. So I think that probably a committee would look at the fact that Kentucky beat them on a neutral site as a little bit weighing a little bit heavier in the Wildcats' favor. So I think that if it comes down to an Auburn-Kentucky matchup, that Auburn needs to win that game in order to get to 1 seed.
Yeah. I can see that. But like I said, with the lack of respect towards the SEC, you hear people talk about how they'll say they're convinced like the Big Ten is better and other conferences are better. But the last time I think the Big Ten won a national championship was like 2000? And so that always kind of puzzles me. Like the SEC, wins more national championships in basketball.
Wow. So what the last one would have been Izzo's Michigan State 2000 team?
I think so. If I'm not mistaken, I think it's been 25 years for the Pac-12. I don't think they've won a title since 97.
With Arizona?
So pretty much, Arizona. So pretty much like the titles have been won by like the Big East, the ACC, and SEC.
About that. Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, Joe, I mean, you can make arguments that maybe the Big 12 is a better conference.
You got
throughout. The Big 10 maybe a better conference, but top 4 teams, I don't say you can possibly make an argument that SEC doesn't have the best top 4 out of any team, out of any conference there is, because they got Auburn, who's a top 5 team, Kentucky, who's a top 10 team. Then you got Arkansas and Tennessee, who are both top 15 teams. And so I think that that's the best top 4 that you have.
You do. And, like what your number 6 team, Alabama, knocked off a 1 seed Gonzaga this year. So you've got, some quality teams.
Also, possibly a 1 seed Baylor that Alabama beat, and possibly a 3 seed Houston. I mean, Alabama is the weirdest team that could end up being a 6 seed in this tournament because, Alabama can beat anybody. They can go out there, they can make a Final Four run, and it's completely possible because they have that ability. or they could also go out as a 6 seed and lose to an 11 seed in the first round. You have no idea.
Right. That's true.
Now, Joe, something sadly that we do have an idea about is the state of the Ole Miss basketball program. It was on firsthand display tonight. In my mind, like it did seem like the writing was on the wall a little bit. You and I've talked about this a lot as to where Kermit Davis was, but I thought in my mind, maybe if he goes out there and wins this game against Missouri, maybe wins the second game for sure, then I think he's probably safe. But at the very least, his team, I think, needed to show some passion, some some, thought in their minds that, you know what, you can win the SEC tournament and make the NCAA tournament. It's a big deal. I remember the first season that Bruce Pearl was at Auburn, he had very little talent. He was taking over for all of Jeff Lebo's players, and they had a pretty disappointing regular season. But they got to the NCAA, they got to the SEC tournament, and all of a sudden KT Harrell started throwing up 3-pointers like nobody's business, and Auburn made it all the way to the semifinals. And they beat an LSU team that was a top 2 or 3 seed. They beat Alabama, and they made this run, and it was great. And it made me excited about where Bruce Pearl was taking Auburn. Even though the first season wasn't what I would have hoped it to be, I could see that there was the movement upward. And Joe, I watched the game tonight, and I know that Kermit Davis is in his 4th year at Ole Miss.
Yeah.
And I saw a team that was disappointing, but I didn't see one that cared, that wanted to be there, that was even trying to continue their season.
Yeah, that concerns me as well, Dan. We were talking about it earlier via text. When I look at this team, you can use the injury excuse, and I think that's what you've heard, the narrative from Davis and the coaching staff all season, is that you're without, one of your best players in Deshaun Ruffin, who was a top recruit last year at point guard. But here's the thing. He's missed practically most of the season. He got injured, I think, the first game of the season, and so you've pretty much played without him. And if you were supposed to be a good team regardless of Ruffin, and if with Ruffin, you were a team that was supposed to maybe contend for the tournament, to go 4-14 in the SEC without him is no indication that you're really a good team or that you've got it together. Like, to me, if you are a good team with depth and the coaching's going well, even without one of your best players, you're going to go out there and be respectable. You're going to win 7, 8, 9 games in the SEC and put up a fight. And we just saw tonight, or this just be kind of a microcosm of all season. And we've also seen, Dan, just the fan base completely disengaged at home games. And I just think that's a bad sign too.
Yeah, I think it is too. And I mean, I think it hurts Kermit Davis too, that you have an athletic director who played basketball at Ole Miss, and Keith Carter, and someone that's going to care about this maybe more than your typical Ole Miss athletic director. And Joe, I heard an interesting theory today that I wanted to run by you, and I kind of like it a little bit. Apparently, Mike White, the Florida head coach, played basketball at Ole Miss with Keith Carter.
Yeah.
And that could be an interesting thing if they fire Kermit Davis. Mike White is not exactly the most beloved son in Florida right now. Would you be happy if they hired Mike White and he escaped the execution mob down in Gainesville?
I don't know if I would be just uber ecstatic, but I could get on board with it. Like, it would be okay. It'd be better than what we have now, I think, for sure.
I think it'd be an improvement, for sure.
Yeah, it's an upgrade. In fact, there was a lot of speculation probably before Davis was hired. So I think that job at Florida was taken by White, I guess, in 2015 when Billy Donovan went to the Thunder.
Yeah.
And prior to that, there were a couple of years where Andy Kennedy had some hot seat questions before, like the Marshall Henderson era and Stephon Moody, and they made the tournament. And I always heard White as a candidate for Ole Miss since he played there, because he was coaching at a smaller university. And then when he went to Florida, you didn't see him as a candidate anymore because he had a better job. And so that's when Ole Miss went out and got Kermit Davis. So it's kind of interesting, how we go full circle with that. So I've always heard rumors that White, would be interested in the Ole Miss job. Now, maybe that opportunity does finally present itself.
Yeah, I think it'd be a good hire, Joe. I mean, I know he hasn't achieved Florida probably what most of the Florida fans would like. And of course they got spoiled by Billy Donovan's career at Florida, which Billy Donovan's probably a top 15 coach of all time in college basketball. Had an excellent career at Florida. And those were tough shoes to fill. And it was tough shoes to fill from a guy who's not from there, that's not used to that culture. And I think maybe moving to Ole Miss could be just a better situation for him all around.
I think so. It's definitely a situation for Davis, for White, for Ole Miss in general, where hitting the reset button, I think, is of the necessity. You just can't, in my opinion, run it back next season. I just don't know what the narrative would be if you tried to bring Davis back out there for another season.
Joe, speaking of running it back, you and I have made frequent jokes over the last 3 years on this show about the fact that how could you possibly have any more evidence against a coach to have an NCAA violation, an NCAA investigation, than that, of course, of LSU's head coach in basketball. And suddenly we're seeing in 2022, almost 5 years after this happens, that suddenly now there's been a notice of allegations against LSU basketball, apparently, and football. But what's funny, though, Joe, is that apparently the NCAA is subbing out now their investigations, and it's from the complex case response team is the one who apparently issued this to LSU. And I mean, I'm just sitting here and I'm like, now, really? I mean, what a joke. I mean, in my mind, like, as LSU, I bet they're probably just going to be like, all right, we're not going to do anything. We're not even going to talk to you. Why do we care?
Right. Yeah, it's one of those things where the timing to me is paramount. Like, that's the question. It's like, what now? Why are you finally doing this? And you're right. We talked about it just ad nauseum, that it made no sense to us with the evidence they had against Will Wade that nothing was done. Like, I've seen programs, where I feel like the evidence was not as concrete or the allegations were not as severe, and they were punished a lot more swiftly.
I mean, Will Wade, the FBI investigated him. They have him on a wiretap saying, I'm going to make a strong A offer. That's out there. Your investigation's done. And then you got somebody in court saying, yes, when he said strong A offer, he meant lots of money. I mean, you can curtail off the best investigatory agency possibly in the world, that being the FBI. You don't have to do anything. I mean, it was all set up for you. I just couldn't believe it. And then now you're going to wait 5 years and suddenly your complex response team says this out there. What's complex about this? This is like the least complex case I've ever heard in my entire life.
Yeah, it's absolutely senseless, Dan. And another thing I'll say is that I remember 3 years ago, whenever it was, he was suspended indefinitely when some of these reports started to really hit some traction. And I thought for sure Will Wade was never going to return, to coach on the bench. And then suddenly he gets reinstated, which was just, totally the unthinkable. And I cannot think of any precedent where you see a basketball coach who was suspended indefinitely for an investigation, or even a college coach for that matter, suspended indefinitely and then able to come back.
No, I've never seen that either. I mean, that was shocking. And then not only did he come back, but Joe Oliva, the president or the athletic director of LSU at that time, he's the one who got fired after he suspended him indefinitely. And so, like, now if you're LSU, I mean, why on earth would you even talk to the NCAA or their complex response case team?
Yeah, the no incentive.
I mean, I think that's what Bruce Pearl did when the NCAA started trying to talk to him. He was just like, I'm not going to talk to you.
Yeah, I just need to talk to Will Wade's attorney or LSU's attorney.
Yeah, so I mean, in my mind, you look at the way the NCAA has moved, how slow they are, how they've lost all credibility. This, to me, is almost counterproductive than putting this out there.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we'll see if something comes of it. But yeah, I would like to know why now they're suddenly deciding to invest in it.
Right. And if you're LSU, I think they dropped that stuff on Will Wade right before he was about to win the regular season SEC last time. Now you're doing it right before the SEC tournament. So obviously your timing is just, impeccable. Just like what they did to Ole Miss in football when they dropped all the allegations against them in football the day before signing day or something like that.
Mm-hmm. It was shortly after that Sugar Bowl win.
Right. So, kudos to you, NCAA, for taking forever on a job that had already been done for you.
Yeah, you're right.
Well, with that being said, there's still a lot of jobs ahead of everybody in the SEC to win the tournament, except for Ole Miss right now. And big job to do for Auburn to possibly get a 1 seed, or Kentucky to possibly get a 1 seed. And definitely looking to maybe see if we get a 7th team make the NCAA tournament. I think right now, for sure you got Auburn, Kentucky, Tennessee, Arkansas, Alabama, LSU. But then after that, it's who's that last team? So, that's the question. Can there be one more? And I think right now, the only ones who have a chance without winning it are South Carolina and Florida, probably with a lean towards Florida.
Yeah, the only way I guess A&M could do it is if they got 2 wins, but really tough, I guess, with Auburn on their side of the bracket.
Well, Florida's got the same problem right there, so we'll see. But, hopefully you haven't had a problem with this. You want to tune into us next week, and we will have our show available, and you can listen to all of our episodes on Spotify, and also tune into us on YouTube on our new YouTube channel, the Dan and Joe Sports Show YouTube channel, and follow us on Facebook and like us on Twitter at DJ Sports Show. And as always, I'm Dan.
And I'm Joe.